Hi, Kunal. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing those insights with us. I think it was a really great example of how things can be done in a business sense. And a lot of what you explained from, I guess, a process. A lot of things jumped out at me when you were presenting that. Visual storytelling was a big one. Communication, the conceptual presentation of how you intend to really demonstrate to the client what you want to achieve and actually involve them in that process. You mentioned the filters and having that inclusive decision making with all the stakeholders. So I think it was a really important thing, as you mentioned several times during the presentation, about young and up and coming lighting designers being aware of that and being able to make use of that as a tool. And as such, I think it really ties into the business of lighting design. I'm just curious as well, from that point of view, from when you started early on, even from your days at LuxLab in the Netherlands and moving into your own practice at Hyderabad. So how did I want to hear a bit more about your journey and how you actually decided to use that as a tool, for that visual storytelling, because we also use that layers of light a lot in our practice, and it's been a game changer really in communication. So I relate directly to what you're are showing here in the presentation. But I'd love to hear from you also that journey from you also early on to your own practice. And did you notice any differences between maybe a Western or European way of doing things versus you mentioned in India on the subcontinent?
Oh, absolutely. It was a culture shock. So, I mean, see, the best part about it is I understand my country well. I understand where they come from. So, and I understand the requirements, and I have never debated the requirements. See, there is always a debate when a Western lighting designer is doing his scheme in the subcontinent. They always say, oh, there's too much light. But our people are different. Correct. Compared to someone from West. We are programmed to being in more light. So we are tropical beings. I'm sure you'll be able to relate to this better because you've been living in Singapore and and you have decent exposure towards the West. So see, initially for me it was a shock because the sensibilities that I had developed during my education and then that brief stint at LuxLab, those sensibilities were still not appreciated, or the clients were not so sensitive enough. Yeah. Today, probably I understand that this knowledge sharing has to be done systematically, and probably not push them towards a certain solution. Yeah. And I think controls has helped me a lot, Ingmar, in that, because it helps me creating those layers of light which I feel is not required, or those brightness levels which I feel is not required, but from the client perspective it is required. So and we face this challenge day in and day out, and not just in residential context but also in hospitality context, because in hospitality also I have so many of my clients telling that the rooms are not well lit, which from our perspective, from a professional lighting design perspective, is more than sufficient. So
there's your cultural filter as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. So see, when you understand that, what a client requires, when you know their filters, and I think you can give a lot better solution because you understand them. It's just understanding people, So yeah, coming to the pictorial aspect or the layered approach has helped us quite a bit, because what was happening was, what I had seen generally in the market when I had come in, this is 2011 I'm talking about,
Yeah.
there were a lot of these vendors who used to take a dialects calculation to the client and they say, oh, you have 400 lux here, you have 200 lux here. And what is 100 lux? Neither the vendor could talk about nor the client could talk about. What is 100 lux end of the day? So this made me realize that it is important that pictorially a person should understand what kind of space he's going to get. So initially in my career, I used to have a lot of time and I used to take people to spaces which I felt were well lit. I used to take them to lounges, I used to take them to fine dining, to tell them, and luckily for me, the clients had time, I had time, we could develop that. And over a period, what we have done is we've from our projects, we've developed a lot of references which we can talk to them about. And having spent so much time in the subcontinent, I have decent amount of projects where I can tell them that, this is what you're going to achieve and this is what we are referring to certain projects, so they can relate to it. And of course, this company that we did this mock-up center, the demo center for, was really a game changer for lighting design market in my city, I feel. I find clients coming to me and talking about, oh, where's the furniture accent? Where is the art accent? So
because of what you can show in that layer of light, they understand where it's coming from and how it's achieved, right?
Yeah. And that's so exciting because it's a blessing to work with a client who is aware of these layers, so I think from I had this reservations when I was consulting this company. Hey, I'm creating a competitor for myself, but I feel I have created an ecosystem where I have people who understand better, and people who understand that they cannot do it will certainly use our services. So I think if I talk about it, I think I've created an ecosystem where people will appreciate thoughtfully lit spaces. Because, I mean, especially if you see India, Ingmar, there is such an explosion of need of curated spaces, because India is now getting to use spaces which are curated. It was never that, and it's in a very, very big way. So I think it's the right time for people to understand this vocabulary of light as well.
Yeah. And that actually brings me to another thing that you mentioned during your presentation about client expectations. It actually all ties in really nicely. The communication part, the managing the expectations. I did say client expectations, but you also talked about, the lines of what the contractors are doing and what the consultants are doing. Sometimes it's a bit blurry. So that you also mentioned that the layers of light doesn't necessarily have to be a super accurate reflection of the exact solution, I think you said. And that sort of brings me to the question of how important is it to accurately be able to portray what you're trying to achieve to the client? Because as you know, we can make really beautiful renders to the point where you might wonder, how are we going to achieve that in reality? And so when the client comes to site, they sort of want to, I guess, see, oh, this is what I expected because this is what I was shown. So what are your thoughts on that in terms of like accurately being able to show that?
So that is one thing that we have been actively working on, Ingmar, that we clearly tell the client, and if you see our presentation also, they are not photorealistic. They are communicating the layers clearly, but they are not photorealistic. So this is something that I make sure that the client is getting, that this is an artistic render of what I want to achieve.
Yeah.
But this is not the real image. and I push my clients not to. I mean, because my clients will be architects as well, and I push them not to do a photorealistic render, because then the whole process of being able to improvise on what you were thinking is completely lost.
Yeah.
So coming to the point that you were mentioning, that how important is it to have the accuracy in terms of the layers you wanted to achieve. So I feel it depends on the project and the client. How are you reading their filters well or not? Because I have clients who are upgrading from a residence which had only tube lights.
Yeah.
So you understand they're living in spaces which do not have shadow, which is flatly lit. So for them, coming and living into a space which has accents, which has contrast, is something a huge leap for them. And on that, see what happens is the materials being used by interior architects also, Ingmar. Um, See, Hyderabad is known for these huge villas, and for an interior architect to show variation, they end up using a lot of different materials in the space. And spaces which are, the floor is dark, the ceiling is dark, they want to create a hospitality experience there. But is the client ready to accept it? Is something,
Another story, isn't it? I mean, you showed some amazing images of projects that you've done, of the bar area, and what do you call it? Like underneath the bar, and all the different materials on the ceiling, and all the intricate details. I guess on a big scale project like that, you talked a bit about working out the details, and some of these details are quite complex, as you mentioned. It also helps in terms of value engineering, because you would have probably encountered that a lot as well, with budgets being quite restrictive on certain projects. I guess from a client perspective, if they understand what layer of light is producing which mood or ambience or effect, do you find that really helps in terms of what they want to cut out, right?
Absolutely.
Or leave in?
Absolutely. I think hospitality that way is, when they see value in what we are proposing, then they are okay to spend a little on it. But I'll tell you, the F&B projects in India are shoestring budgets, or probably less than shoestring budget. But yes, the clients are better aware of what you want to create, and they will help you getting that solution. They will not want to compromise on the effect, but they would certainly want to compromise on the kind of fixture they're going to buy. But see, in this also, Ingmar, I as an independent practice, I have seen that, if you're going to push a F&B space to buy premium products, it certainly doesn't make sense, because the shelf life of a F&B space is not even 3 years.
No.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's very important to understand the economics behind it also. Yeah. So I think as someone who is from the city, who understand how their businesses work, who is not coming from an ecosystem where the economics is completely different, I think I believe that my clients are happy because I understand their businesses better. I understand what their break-even will be. My suppliers are happy because they know that I know what they can supply in a certain time. I think all of this young designers have to really be aware of into which ecosystem they are working in. So see, the whole idea of getting into VLDC was I wanted to share what I have gone through in this 12 years, because it's very important to understand the ecosystem you're working in.
Correct.
And
yep.
I think if you're coming from a different ecosystem and catering to a very different ecosystem, you will certainly see that friction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on that note, I think being able to share that knowledge is a really great thing to be able to do. We have a lot of young and upcoming designers. Some are already in a practice, some are coming fresh out of KTH and Visma and places like that. So it's nice to be able to do that. Do you have, now I guess if we round up everything that we've talked about and also what you've so eloquently put in your presentation, what would be maybe some final words of advice that you would give to young people who are looking at the lighting design profession?
I think what I would like to tell youngsters is, lighting design is a very, very exciting profession because of the variables that we deal with. We are dealing with science, we are dealing with art, we are dealing with people. So I think it's a very, very exciting profession because you are doing something new each day. You're not, and no day is a boring day. At the same time, understanding the ecosystem, understanding the people is extremely important, I feel. End of the day, it's about people. If you're able to connect, if you're able to understand, if you're able to strike the dialogue well, then I think it'll be fun to work. Of course, being able to charge the right fee, being able to sustain the office, all that is a different topic altogether. But
Yeah,
we are getting into good times.
Absolutely. Kunal, thank you so much. I loved how you brought up some of these really key points in, I guess, the journey and the business of lighting design. I also love how you made it clear about reading people's filters and how to cater to those different expectations coming out of that. But no, it's been a great presentation, and also thanks for sharing with us. And
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.